walk along one day and do nothing wrong, play by the rules, be a good person, do everything right, and doesn't guarantee anything.
What is up? GoodMicWork back at you, coming to you on the 18-year anniversary of Owen Hart's death. Man, does time fly. As most of you know, a handful of my videos, about a dozen or so, were taken down by YouTube for being copyright matched by the WWE several months ago. During that time, I have been slowly re-uploading all of them to you, and I've pretty much got them all done, with the exception of one that I was holding off until this date. 3 years ago, on this date in 2014, I uploaded episode 200. It was just a random impromptu commentary, a little tribute to Owen Hart, casually discussing his career, the circumstances surrounding his death, and just any other memories of Owen that I might have had going on in my head at the time. I thought it would have been a really nice video to commemorate his career and to remember Owen Hart, and my 200th commentary fell on the 15-year anniversary of his death. So since that was one of the videos that was taken down, I figured I would wait until the anniversary of his death came around again. Here in 2017, we're now on the 18-year anniversary of this, and I will just re-upload that commentary to you and take out all of the video footage that got matched and, just let you relive this episode that I gave to you all those years ago. Now, most of you know that Owen Hart was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. His death, I think, hit me harder personally than any other wrestling death that we've dealt with. I watched this take place on Over the Edge live at home with my friends. It's a night that I will never forget, and I miss Owen every day. And you guys all know what a big Hart family fan I am. Of course, everybody knows that Bret Hart was my favorite wrestler of all time, and what happened to his little brother at Over the Edge in 1999 was one of the most heartbreaking things and one of the most tragic things, if not the most tragic thing, that we have ever seen in pro wrestling, because Owen Hart didn't deserve what happened to him, and it still haunts me 18 years later to this very day, and it's so sad. So what I decided to do is give you guys this re-upload on the anniversary of his death, and I'm even going to throw in a little bonus material. This is kind of a combination of my 200th episode and a video that I put up on my second channel several years ago of a hotline report from the day of and the day after Owen Hart's death. Back in the day, there was no internet, really. There was no way to read wrestling news without calling hotlines or subscribing to newsletters or whatnot. What I did is I called this 800 number, or this 900 number, that was in the back of pretty much every wrestling magazine at the time. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, all sorts of wrestling magazines you could find back in the 90s would have this hotline number advertised in there. So I called it on the night of Over the Edge, and I called it the next day on Monday before Monday Night Raw. And I took a tape recorder and I held it up against the phone speaker and I recorded both hotline reports. So I thought it would be cool to maybe include those hotline reports at the beginning of this commentary. So that's what you're going to hear first. This is 18-year-old audio here, so please forgive the quality of it. But I thought this would be a nice little inclusion to this re-upload for those of you who wanted to know what it was like the night that Owen Hart died or the day after Owen Hart died and what everybody was talking about and what everybody was saying. You got to remember, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no internet wrestling sites. I mean, there were a few, but it wasn't as accessible, and, it wasn't how the majority of fans followed the wrestling news at the time. So you kind of just had to get what you could get off of television or off of hotlines or off of magazines or newsletters that would come out days and sometimes weeks and months later. So it was tough to get news back then on what exactly happened to Owen. So anyway, you guys enjoy this re-upload. Keep in mind, this commentary that I did is 3 years old. It was episode 200. I'm now on episode 430. So this was a long, long time ago. I don't even really remember what I said in this commentary. I just know it was a lot of random talking about Owen Hart. I was just shooting from the hip, off the top of my head, just casually shooting the shit about Owen Hart and his career and any memories I may have felt like sharing, and a lot of the circumstances, of course, surrounding his death and that whole situation. So the first thing I'm going to play for you are the two hotline reports that I recorded personally the night of and the day after Owen Hart's death, and then after that you will hear the re-upload of episode 200 and all my thoughts on Owen Hart that I had at that time. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy this small tribute to Owen Hart.
You're on Pro Wrestling Telephone line at $2 a call. The worst nightmare in the history of the World Wrestling Federation took you heard me correctly, dies from a tragic fall from the ceiling of Kemper Arena in Kansas City. Owen was hanging down from the rafters as the superhero, the Blue Blazer. Something went terribly wrong. The cable or equipment broke or failed, and Owen crashed down to his death. Medics massaged his heart, but Owen could not be saved. Still, the show must go on. Wrestlers, stunned, just going through the motions, try their best, fighting off tears and praying for the Hart family. Jim Ross made the painful announcement on camera to shocked fans. The actual fall and Owen's body were not shown on TV. The show, which lost its steam, ended about 20 minutes early, and no matter whatever happened, Over the Edge will always be remembered in the wrestling record books for the sad loss of Owen Hart. Pray for Owen and his family. We'll update this terrible tragedy at our regular time, high noon Eastern time on Monday. HOTLINE at $2 a call. This is the hardest report I've had to make since the stabbing murder of Bruiser Brody, and that was a decade ago. Mainstream media headlines the story of Owen Hart's fatal 50-foot fall from the rafters of Kemper Arena in Kansas City live on Over the Edge. What exactly occurred is still not clear. There are many conflicting eyewitness stories. The Kansas City Fire Department spokesman said the harness on Owen was not properly attached. Hart fell in front of horrified fans, his legs hitting a referee first, then the ropes and ring post. Medics were there immediately, but Owen was turning colors. They gave CPR and heart massage. Owen was rushed to Truman Hospital, where the young star was declared dead. Owen just turned 33 May 7th. He leaves his wife Martha and 2 young children, and members of the legendary Hart family. Sharing in the grief are the wrestlers who somehow finished the show in shock like zombies. Vince McMahon said, "We do not have any answers. There is an ongoing investigation." Kansas City Homicide is also investigating, not thinking it's murder, but because of a strange circumstance. Backstage at Over the Edge, Owen's comrades were stunned with a mixture of prayers and tears. Undertaker got an upset win over Steve Austin in that main event. Bret Hart was in the air flying to Los Angeles for an appearance tonight on the Jay Leno Show. He did not know about the tragedy. WCW met Bret with a private jet to fly him home right away. It's not known if the Tonight Show angle will be canceled or if Randy Savage will fill in for Bret. Controversy rages over the WWF not stopping Over the Edge. That and other behind-the-scenes stories on Owen's sad death on Tuesday's Hotline. The ring bell clangs 10 times. Rest in peace, Owen.
I'm going to take you back first, to the night of his death, because that is the anniversary that we're on. It's been 15 years since Over the Edge. I can talk with a little bit less passion, even though I'm still deeply scarred by what happened to Owen and how unfortunate it was. Looking back, there was so much blame being placed from the fans, from the wrestlers, from the media. You can point the finger at a lot of different people, but at the end of the day, this was nothing more than an accident. And I think for the most part, all of the, strong-thinking Hart family members, they deep down understand that. Nobody was trying to kill Owen. Nobody did this on purpose, and this was a pretty routine stunt that had been done by WCW and all sorts of other forms of entertainment for so long without any issues, and it was just a terrible, terrible accident. Fucked up things happen in life. Fucked up things happen in entertainment. I used to live 2 miles away from where Brandon Lee was shot and killed on the set of The Crow. And the other wrestler that ironically did the same stunt as Owen on a routine basis was Sting, who based his character after The Crow. Bottom line is, it was horrible, it was a tragedy, and it was unbelievably shocking, but still, it was an accident, and that's all. Some people like to blame Vince McMahon. Some people like to blame Vince Russo. I blamed Vince Russo for a short time when I was trying to go through all different guys to blame and who was responsible for putting Owen Hart in a ridiculous situation. I did lay a lot of the blame on Vince Russo at the time because he was the one that wanted to put Owen Hart in the Blue Blazer gimmick, and without that gimmick, he wouldn't have had to come down from the ceiling and the whole thing wouldn't have happened. And as much as I dislike Russo, I don't want to put the blame on him because by that logic, you have to think about Sting and WCW. Okay, whoever came up with the idea for Sting to be this gimmick, if the same thing would have happened to Sting, by that logic, you have to blame the person that came up with the Crow gimmick for Sting's death, and that doesn't make any sense. It was just an accident. The Monday Night Wars are just as equally to blame as Vince Russo is, because without the Monday Night Wars, the WWE wouldn't be forced to do this crazy writing to begin with, and both companies wouldn't try to outdo each other, especially with effects and production and all of that. And that's something that the WWE did a lot better than WCW. WWE probably took a look at Nitro and saw Sting coming down from the rafters and said, fuck, we can do that, and we can do that better. So as much as I dislike Russo and his booking philosophy and everything he's done in wrestling, I'm not going to blame him for the death of another person. It's not Vince Russo's fault. It's just horrible to think about. Every time I went to a show after Owen Hart's death, anytime I go to any building, any indoor arena, and I'm in the crowd and I look up at the ceiling and I look at how high it is, and I look up to the catwalks that are up there. Sometimes you can even see guys up there walking around. But anytime I'm in an arena, with a roof on it, and I look up to the rafters, I always think about Owen Hart. And I look up there and think to myself how terrifying that must have been. Not only for him to be hanging up there, but for him to be falling. I mean, there's even stories. Who was the ref in the ring? I think it was Jimmy. Was it Corderas? Or I'm pretty sure it was Jimmy Corderas. And there was a story that himself or the ring announcer or somebody had said that even when Owen was falling, he was yelling for them to get out of the way. I don't know if that's true or not. If Owen was yelling, he was probably just yelling for his life. And I think the only good thing, about it is that it just didn't happen to be caught on camera. If that would have been on the live feed, I think there is a 7-second delay. I don't know if they would have been able to get the footage off of TV ahead of time. But you could hear it in the announcer's voice when they go to the promo and you just hear Jim Ross say, we got big problems out here. And you're like, what the fuck? And then they come back and explain what's happening. It was just such a surreal night, such a surreal moment. And the pay-per-view was good up until that point because I had people over and we were hanging out, drinking beer, having a great time. WWE was on top of the world. We were anticipating a great pay-per-view, and the first couple of matches were really hot. The crowd was hot. It's a great wrestling town as it is. And things really just couldn't be better. And when they came back from that promo and said what was going on in the ring with Owen Hart, and you could feel that something wasn't right, even when they continued with the show, none of us were joking. None of us were like, oh my gosh, I wonder if Owen Hart broke his legs, or, I wonder if he's going to be okay. I wonder how long he's going to be out of action. We all knew there was a pretty good chance Owen Hart was dead. You could tell that just by the body language of the wrestlers, by the demeanor of the guys in the back and the announcers and everything, that this was a horribly serious situation. And Owen might not make it. And about 30 minutes or so later, Jim Ross made the painful announcement to all of us on worldwide pay-per-view that Owen Hart had died. And what happened after that? They had a fucking match. That's something, looking back on it to this day, it's hard for me to defend the decision to keep the pay-per-view going. At the time I defended it, I think I defended it throughout a lot of years because I was saying, hey, you got to look at it from WWE's point of view. They've never had a situation like this. Nobody's ever died in the middle of live pay-per-view, and they have to think of their responsibilities to the cable companies, to their advertisers, and all of this crap that's going on, in the business line of thinking of WWE without just saying, okay, one of our wrestlers just died in the ring, call off the show, nobody needs to go through an event now, one of our friends has just died. I understand that the WWE had to make a decision that has never been made before, but looking back, I think it was the wrong one because the rest of that pay-per-view was terrible. I'm still surprised that it's on the WWE Network. I don't even know how I feel about that. I don't see any point in showing that one. Yes, they want to say every pay-per-view is available on the WWE Network. Well, I think it would be okay if you excluded just one. And the worst part about Over the Edge is that they went through with a title change. At least if they were going to keep the show going and they weren't going to cancel it, at least change the finish of the main event to where maybe the McMahons weren't involved. The fact that Vince ran out there after, one of his wrestlers just died about 2 hours earlier, to me it was a little bit disturbing. He should have kept his ass backstage doing as much damage control as possible, not worrying about some stupid fucking wrestling angle. Austin could have dropped the belt to The Undertaker at any time. He could have done it on Raw 2 weeks later. He could have done it the King of the Ring the month after. Why they insisted on doing it this way, I have no idea, because they forced themselves to have to go back and relive Over the Edge, because that now counts in the record books as a title victory for The Undertaker over Steve Austin. I think they should have gone with a disqualification, or they should have had Austin beat The Undertaker, and if they wanted to give Taker the belt, they could have just done that at a later time, and they could have forgotten all about Over the Edge. Because you can cut out all the Owen Hart footage
that you want out of that pay-per-view. We all know that's the pay-per-view that it happened. And for somebody like me who watched it and experienced it live, right on live TV as a young man in his mid-20s, you know, it scarred me for life. And it was awful. And I felt terrible. And it was just tragic. I think the majority of my listeners, the age group that you guys are in, Eddie Guerrero would be your Owen Hart. Because the outpouring of support and how Eddie Guerrero in the minds of these fans can do no wrong reminds me a lot of my feelings with Owen Hart. I think the Eddie Guerrero death hit a lot of you the same way the Owen Hart death hit me. I loved Eddie Guerrero, don't get me wrong, loved him. He was one of my all-time favorites, and I'm so saddened by his death, and he was just such an amazing man. But at the same time, Eddie Guerrero's lifestyle, you know, kind of determined his fate. And I don't think his death was really all that shocking when you look at wrestling deaths and what a lot of other guys have gone through who have lived, you know, questionable lifestyles. What makes Owen Hart's situation so tragic is that at the end of the day, he didn't give a shit about wrestling. The only thing he wanted to do was wrestle enough to make enough money to go retire and be with his family forever. They were building their dream house. Talk about salt in the wound. Owen and Martha had just put all this effort into building this just dream love nest for themselves and their kids and their family, you know, in this quiet little town, and they haven't even moved in yet, or they're in the process of moving and really, you know, planting their feet in life. And, you know, their path was lit, is what Martha said in one of the documentaries. She knew what was ahead of her. She knew what they were going to be doing in their lives in the future, and that's a very comforting thing. And then in a snap of a finger, she gets a phone call that changes everything. Whether you agree with Martha's decision to have lawsuits against the WWE and keep Owen Hart out of the Hall of Fame and all of that, you cannot deny that this woman went through a horrible tragedy. To this day, to the best of my knowledge, she is not remarried. I think she has earned the right to be as vile as she wants because, you know, she went through something that none of us can relate to. Not one of you listening to me can say, hey, I was in the middle of building my dream house with my wife, we have 2 young children, and she fell from the roof of an arena at a wrestling show. None of you can say that. So what she is going through, we have to respect as a horrible tragedy and something that could have so easily been avoided. That's another thing I hate about this tragedy is when you think about it, Owen should be alive right now. He should be happily retired, living a great life with his family. He would have already been in the Hall of Fame by now and probably come back to do occasional appearances. I'm sure he would have been involved in the McMahon-Bret Hart storyline a few years ago. Bret Hart probably would have came back to the WWE, maybe even a little bit sooner than he did, had Owen Hart not died. And on top of that, Owen would have had his family, and his family would have had him. And it would have been, you know, maybe a happy ending for once. There are a lot of little things that probably could have gone different that day at Over the Edge that would have kept Owen Hart alive. And maybe one of those things would have included Owen Hart just saying no to the creative team. No, I'm not doing that. It's stupid. I'm fucking Owen Hart. I don't need a cape or a mask, and I sure as shit don't need to come down from the fucking ceiling. It still pisses me off. 15 years to this day. I'm so angry almost still that Owen Hart died. I don't blame anybody because I firmly believe it was an accident and nobody meant to do this. But it's so frustrating and it pisses me off so bad that it happened at all. It shouldn't have happened. And I have no doubt there probably was some negligence somewhere in that whole situation, you know, but it doesn't change the fact that it was an accident. And it just sucks. It's just I'm more frustrated at life than I am at trying to blame a particular person, you know, for Owen Hart's death. So if I'm feeling this way as a fan, I can only imagine the pain Martha must have gone through and what she probably still is going through to this day. I hope one day she reconsiders, and I think she will. I mean, as fucked up as this situation is, it seems like the WWE can always, you know, make people come around. And I think if enough years go by, it's already been 15 years, you know, she is just so bitter over the death and she blames the WWE that she doesn't want Owen Hart to be associated with the company that killed him ever. And I definitely don't blame her for that, but it is a very unique situation because Owen Hart made his fame in that very company and he has millions of fans worldwide, you know, that they would like to see Owen Hart remembered. And I think in time they will get to that point because think about Owen Hart's kids. I don't know where Oj and Athena stand on the subject. Maybe one day they're going to want to see their dad, you know, remembered and honored for the contributions that he made to the wrestling business. You know, they may want to see that happen, and one day they will be making these decisions. And I'm hoping sometime in the future, you know, I know the lawsuits are settled, but I'm hoping there can be some sort of a personal reconciliation to where Martha, you know, she can grieve forever. That's fine. We all miss Owen. You know, it's horrible. But I'm hoping that at the end of the day, just like myself and everybody else, she does realize that this was an accident and nobody was doing this on purpose. And to take away everything that Owen Hart gave to wrestling, to take that away from the fans, you know, just because you're bitter towards the WWE, I think would be wrong. The WWE is not trying to make money off of Owen Hart by putting him in the Hall of Fame. I'm sure they could work out some sort of an agreement to where every dollar made by Owen Hart's induction, if they sell a t-shirt, if he helps get ratings or anything like that, is just donated to charity. I don't think the WWE has any financial motivation to put Owen Hart in the WWE Hall of Fame. It's not going to make a difference to them. And if they can help out the Owen Hart Foundation or put some money to a good cause by inducting Owen at the same time, maybe by releasing a DVD on Owen and all the proceeds go to his foundation or something like that, I have no doubt whatsoever that the WWE will be more than willing to do something like that. And Owen Hart is the last of 2, maybe 3 names that's really missing from the WWE Hall of Fame to make it truly legitimate. And I think Owen deserves it. And I hope that one day Martha comes to that realization, because when you think about things logically, you know, she's going to deny Owen Hart being enshrined into the WWE Hall of Fame, being remembered in a positive way, maybe even possibly raising money for his foundation, but yet it's going to be okay for Over the Edge to be shown on the WWE Network. The WWE owns the rights to Owen's footage and likeness. They can show him anywhere, anytime that they want. So it's not like by not putting him in the Hall of Fame, they're stopping the WWE from using Owen Hart. They can do that anytime they want. It just seems like a stupid battle to fight. You know, let Owen Hart be remembered in a positive way. The WWE always speaks very fondly of him. Vince McMahon, trust me. You know, people think he's such a cutthroat piece of shit bastard. He has a heart. He was horrified. And we also have to think about what Owen would have wanted. You know, Martha might know the answer to that question more than we do. Who's to say if Owen was alive, he wouldn't be in agreement with her, saying, yeah, they killed me. Fuck them. I'm not going into the Hall of Fame. If not for them, I'd be alive right now. So there's a lot of things to consider when looking back at this accident and what the right thing to do is and what the wrong thing to do is. But I hope in time, you know, everybody can move on and get past it as best as possible, because it has been 15 years and you can't change the past. You know, I wish we could. I wish Owen Hart was here right now, but you can't change it. All you can do is deal with it as best as possible and do your best to move on. I don't know if Martha has ever done that. She was so heartbroken, you know, about this that, like I said, she never remarried. It seems as if her and her kids live a very, very sheltered life. They're all extremely smart, extremely intelligent people, and I think the kids are going to really good schools. Martha has numerous degrees from all over the world, and I think his kids are going to do just fine in life, and Martha's done a great job raising them by herself. And I wish nothing but the best for those 2 kids, and my heart just goes out to them to lose their dad in that way at such a young age. Just had to be horrible. But that's enough about the death. That's enough about the tragedy. Let's talk a little bit about Owen Hart the wrestler, a little bit about Owen Hart the person. You know, Owen Hart was the youngest of all 12 of those Hart kids. He was the baby of the Hart family, which just adds to the emotion of the tragedy and everything. And ironically, this is something I did not know. I just recently found this out. But Owen Hart was the youngest of 12 children. Martha was the youngest of 11. Isn't that crazy? I mean, what are the odds? I can't believe I'm just recently finding this out. After all these years, I never knew that about Martha Hart. But Owen was always just described as an easygoing, well-behaved young man, you know, always respectful, always polite. You know, he was never a bully. He was never a dickhead. You know, he was just a good, hard-working kid, and everybody liked Owen even before he started wrestling. And he was a good-looking kid. I mean, the Hart clan, as much as I love them, they're not the most attractive bunch of people. I mean, Diana is very beautiful. Brett is a decent-looking guy, but the rest of them are, you know, pretty much bow-wows. And Owen Hart was just that young, good-looking, blonde-haired kid. You know who Owen Hart reminded me of when he was young? He reminded me of Johnny Lawrence in The Karate Kid, the evil Cobra Kai leader that was out to destroy Daniel LaRussa and Mr. Miyagi. He kind of looked like fucking Johnny from the Cobra Kais. He got into wrestling in high school. He was very, very good at it. He went to wrestle for his dad in Stampede, and they eventually got him some money and got him signed to the WWE when he came in as the Blue Blazer. And from there, he left WWE, wrestled a little bit overseas. I think had a brief stint in WCW and came back to the WWE. And then from there, we know how his career took off. His best work was his feud with Brett. I mean, that was awesome. That WrestleMania match, still to this day, probably my favorite match in WrestleMania history, just because it was 2 brothers who trained in the basement of the wrestling family, going out and opening up a huge monumental WrestleMania at that time, 10th WrestleMania, 10th anniversary, Madison Square Garden, having the opening match on the show and tearing the fucking house down. I just thought it was great. I mean, that night I realized that the Bret Hart-Owen Hart feud was going to be good because that match was awesome. And I knew they were going to have some kick-ass rematches, especially since Owen Hart won, and once Bret was champion, well, there you go. Now you you got your number one contender. And they worked against each other every night. Bret Hart put the title on the line against Owen just about every single night on the house show circuit during the summer leading up to the big cage match at SummerSlam. Even though the Bret Hart-Owen Hart feud continued well beyond that, that was really the blow-off, and Bret Hart was able to defeat Owen in the cage and retain his title. Looking back, I have no idea why they decided to give the title to Bob Backlund instead of Owen Hart. That makes no sense. If they were going to have Bret drop it, he should have dropped it in the fucking cage match to Owen at SummerSlam and then maybe won it back from him at Survivor Series. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever understand their decision to not put the belt on Owen, but to put the belt on Backlund. But Owen did such a great job with his character. He was so good at being that little jealous brother. He could do everything perfectly. He could whine and bitch and moan with the best of the heels. You know, he could be completely delusional at times and constantly, you know, remind everybody that he's better and he could kick Bret's ass anytime he wants. Where just a year earlier, the motherfucker's teaming with Coco Beware wearing MC Hammer pants. And that's one of the things I like about heels the best, when they can be so ridiculously delusional and they can actually believe the nonsense that's coming out of their mouth. And when they speak, as a fan, you believe that they believe it. And Owen Hart did that better than anybody. One of my favorite heelish moments that Owen Hart ever did is when he accepted the Slammy that he didn't even win. I think it was at the 96 Slammys where it was like, I don't know, it was like Kaboom of the Year or some shit like that. But basically, it was Shawn Michaels getting kicked in the head, leading to the whole post-concussion syndrome storyline that they did in 1995. It was Owen Hart's Inseguri that put Shawn on the shelf. Owen Hart jumps up on stage, snatches the Slammy, and just proceeds to thank himself and nobody else. He said, "I want to thank myself. I did this all by myself. Nobody helped me. Not you, Mom. Not you, Dad. And certainly not you, my lousy brother, Bret. I did it alone, and I'm the fucking man." And then he walks off stage. It was one of the funniest things because that's what I'm talking about. He's so delusional, and it's the best. Any of you remember King of the Ring 1996 when they decided to put Owen Hart on color commentary? The whole goddamn thing was a stand-up comedy routine. He was so quick and so witty and so funny, and some of the things he said, you know, you just had you laughing your ass off. I don't even know if he prepared for any of this. I just truly think that Owen is just naturally that funny. I mean, he was just great. Such a character. It's a shame that he was never world champion. I definitely think he had the ability. He definitely had the charisma, and he could definitely do it in the ring. I think Owen Hart was Kurt Angle before Kurt Angle was. Remember when Kurt Angle came in originally in 99 and 2000, that first year or two there? He was very corny and very funny, and he was saying things in the way kind of how Owen Hart did that sometimes you didn't even know if he knew how funny he was. But underneath all that sarcasm and delusion, there lied a superb mat wrestler, and I think Owen Hart had a lot of those same traits as Kurt Angle. That would have been a great match. A lot of people dream of a Kurt Angle-Bret Hart match. I almost think an Owen Hart-Kurt Angle match would be better. Owen was just an all-around wonderful wrestler. I'm proud to own a ton of Owen Hart footage, and it's just so nice to go back and watch some of his matches from when he was younger and his Stampede days, you know, and just what a good athlete he was. I think he was definitely the most athletic of all the Harts. I could go on forever about Owen Hart. I could just keep rambling like this for another 2 hours, but let's wrap it up. This, I just wanted to be a little tiny tribute to Owen Hart. I want to acknowledge the fact that it's been 15 years, and I also want to acknowledge the fact that in that 15 years, you know, my sadness level has remained the same. I'm just as sad today as I was, you know, a month after he died. I'm not sure as a wrestling fan if I ever really, truly ever got over this. It was that shocking to me. It was so shocking, in fact, that by the time I got to Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, I was numb, you know, to all of these tragic, shocking deaths in wrestling. Because to me, we had already seen the craziest. Chris Benoit choking out his family and then killing himself, that ranks up there. I gotta say, Chris Benoit might have beat out Owen Hart for the most shocking wrestling death. But when you look at the circumstances surrounding Owen, you know, and just what a good-hearted, kind family man he was, who really had no desire to make professional wrestling his whole entire life, died in such a horrible way for the one guy in the locker room, you know, that doesn't eat, sleep, and breathe the business. He's the one that has to die in the ring. It's so unfair. And I still don't think to this day I'm truly over it. I'm definitely over placing blame. I don't blame Vince McMahon. I don't blame Vince Russo. I really don't blame anybody. I'm just frustrated that an accident like this was allowed to happen, and it's a shame, and it happened to the worst guy. And you can't forget the screw job in all of this either. You know, Owen Hart's death, you know, happened just 2 years after, you know, Bret Hart was screwed like that. It just created so much bad blood, you know, between the Harts and the McMahons, and now that we've gotten 15 years, you know, later, and, you know, some of the bad blood is being able to be rectified. Bret Hart has since come back to the WWE, gone into the Hall of Fame. kissed and made up with Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels and tried to put all of this just horrible past behind them, it gives me hope that we can one day see that, in the future for Owen Hart. But in the meantime, all we can do is remember Owen ourselves for the great wrestler he was. We have the WWE Network now for you younger fans that didn't get to see, a lot of Owen Hart's work. You can check out countless amounts of pay-per-views and shows that Owen Hart competed on and relive what a great wrestler he was. Take care of yourselves and long live Owen Hart. Peace.